When you have to introduce someone you don't know, it's easy, you just read the CV. When you have to introduce someone you love and admire, it's a little more difficult. Jody has instructed me that less is more, and she has signed off on my being able to tell you that she has taught here since 1981. She has been a criminal defense lawyer and trying cases for over 30 years. And she is head of the training for the Indiana Public Defender Council. What I need to add is that she is asked to be on every faculty on death penalty work, and yet a few months ago she came as a student to the Jerry Spence Ranch for that death penalty program. Her commitments to rediscovering herself thrills me. Gifted poet, raised children who are a work of art. And when I first met her, and still to this day, I think of her as an inspired melding of a Quaker nun and a biker chick.
There goes my chances of a date this week. Welcome. And I know you sit there with a lot of trepidation. I've sat where you've sat, and I remember it. And they told me they had put this on. And how's that? They had. I remember my first year when I was at the National Criminal Defense College, and that was in 1980. And I sat there with the biggest chip on my shoulder thinking, who the heck are these people, and what do they have to teach me? And I didn't like, back then it was a lot of good old boy, a lot of big good old white boy, a lot of silver hair at the temples, and you know, there weren't too many role models for people who looked like me. And I was concerned. But at the end of the 2 weeks, I thought, these people aren't perfect, but they are great in their courage and their commitment to make me a better lawyer. And so I hope that that is what you will conclude after 2 weeks with this week's faculty and the faculty next week, and each other. Each other. You're going to learn a lot from each other. I've always loved, there's a Hasidic tale where they're talking to the guy who is cleaning the temple. And he is actually having people come and visit the temple, and people are saying, asking him questions, just simple things, you know, kind of the mechanics, where's the bathroom, where's the seating, where's this, and he wants to pontificate from the Old Testament scripture. He wants to be Moses. And the rabbi overhears him and says to him, you know, Zusya, when you stand before the God will not ask you, why were you not more like Moses? The God will ask you, why were you not more like Zusya? And so the other piece we want you to take away here is that you lawyer from who you are. You must be true to yourself and find your own inner fire, find your own passion, find your own commitment. And that is one reason why you will have rotating through your small groups all these different faculty, because we don't pretend to think that any one of us will have a style or a way of lawyering that will be something that you can rip off. We're all ripping each other off here. I'll be taking notes when I'm teaching in the small groups on things you're doing, because I'm going to take them home, because you bring a lot of your Zusya to the table. So just a little bit about the philosophy of the program. We don't have a wireless mouse. I have to walk, and we have a connection problem. We don't have a wireless mouse. I have to walk back here. Some of you are public defenders. And, you know, this is kind of what we do, isn't it? But I have a lot of pride. For many years, I was a public defender in North Carolina or a federal defender in Baltimore. And of course, when I do death penalty work, I do it as a public defender. God's work, God's wages. You look out in your waiting room, it's God's waiting room. You know, we have the challenge of trying to convince people who have been just brutally convinced otherwise that their lives have more meaning than buying another pair of sneakers. And we do that work. It is God's work, and I am with you in that work. Education either colonizes or it liberates. We are teaching people who are working with the oppressed. If you come away from this program with this sense of power, we will feel encouraged. This sense that you do not have to be a mere reaction to the police, to the prosecutors, that you can actually be an affirmative mover in the courtroom. You can be a change agent in the courtroom. You can make it happen. So much of my younger lawyering was spent looking at the police reports and saying, I'm afraid. This stuff looks pretty good to me. It looks like my client is guilty. And I was very reactionary. I just would look at it, and my big line of defense would be, sure hope that cop's on vacation when the case is set for trial. Does anybody, whoa, check the vacation schedule, now I got a shot. Okay, and so some of what we're about here is trying to get you out of that dualistic, that all or nothing. It's either theirs or ours, because usually, just as the trickster says, the trickster likes it when it's against all odds. We are the tricksters, and we like those odds, and we look for the middle ground, the yes but, the way to get around it. And that's what good theorizing does for us. This connection problem is going to go on and on, I could tell, because I didn't disable that. Okay. Sometimes you kind of look at things and you're worried, do they make any sense? You know, you're out there being creative, maybe in your bar, you're talking about your cases, you're talking with a friend, and you say, you know, there's a goose in the engine. And people just laugh at you. People think, no, it's that sinister client of yours. It's those evil incarnate. It's those people without a conscience. It's the Iraqis. It's the Islamics. It's the terrorists. Well, you know what? Sometimes we know, because that's our life with our clients, that there is a goose in the engine. And so some of what you're going to be doing for the next couple of days is looking for that goose in these huge government engines. I'm about someone who knows their own fear. I think one reason I'm asked to teach is because it's all too obvious that I am nervous up here. And I manage still to communicate even though I'm quite nervous. And so I model for people that you can care, you can have your own little reservoir of insecurities, but you can still have something really to say and be heard by people who want to hear it or don't want to hear it. I've always been inspired by Marley sitting out there trying to protest an entire government, monstrous racism, and he just embraced his fear. You know, kind of the way the Buddhists do. My fear is my only carriage, and I will push on through. So don't run from your fear. Love your fear. Or we've got Audre Lorde. You know, if someone on the staff can come up and delete this, or minus it down and do the disable the radio, or Jeff, I don't know, somebody do that, because it's going to drive us nuts. I loved Audre Lorde, another woman, cancer survivor, lesbian, black in a time where blacks weren't very received. A very powerful woman, and she didn't deny that she was afraid. She just says, when I work in support of my vision, in furtherance of my vision, it matters less and less that I'm afraid. Of course we have some fear in the courtroom. When you go in and you're the only thing that stands in the way of a government that wants to kill your client, let me tell you, you're afraid. When you're only, you know, even if you're not death penalty lawyers, you know, you're looking at a lot of years and you're it. You're the only thing that might stop the steamroller, and you are afraid. But I would just say, take that fear like the martial artists do and embrace it. Move into your fear. That is the way you break the hold of the fear. Thank you, Jeff.
I think that works.
Then there becomes a moment where you realize you only have one good fact. I never had a case where I have more than one or two good facts. So the challenge, of course, becomes how to make that fact bigger. You've got to figure out through rhetorical devices, through story, through emphasis, how to make that fact be the killer fact in the courtroom. And that's some of what we're going to be working with today, how to make the facts that sing for us really sing. There's an old, anybody from Chicago? Eugene Pincham, yes. He used to be on the faculty at this program when I was a baby lawyer. And he told a story about, and you're always looking for wisdom in some persona that the jury will say, oh my God, that's not a slimy criminal defense lawyer, she has a mother. Gene Pincham, African-American guy, lawyering in really the late 60s in Chicago, pretty much of a minority in 1,000 ways. He always talked about his mother. And when he would talk about reasonable doubt, he would say, you know, we didn't have a lot of money. And a treat for us was being able to put sugar in our milk. And my mom, when she would come home from working that second job, she would check the sugar canister, and if it wasn't piled up in that perfect cone, she would know that we had stolen sugar. And so they were very careful, the kids, to do this one day when they just wanted a treat. She comes home, she hasn't even gotten to the canister. And she looks at the kids and she says, all right, tell me who's been in the sugar bowl. You need to tell the truth about this. And what Pincham would say to the jury is, you know, we piled that cone perfectly, but what she knew, it was the sugar on the floor. It was that fine grit, those little points you score in cross-examination, those few facts that were inconsistent with the mountain, the perfect, so-called perfect cone mountain of the government's proof. And so we are looking and encouraging the jury to look for the sugar on the floor. That's our job. And we're looking everywhere, right? This is on the road to find out. I think the statute of limitation is run about 3 weeks before cases. When I started as a baby lawyer, I would spread all the discovery out, all my investigative reports out, everything I had in a half moon around me, and I'd do a doobie. And I get they're starting to get it, they're not quite awake this morning. And you look at it, and you know, you might just see it a little differently. A little creative juice starts to be flowing. But what was important about that is not that I got stoned, is that I allowed for time for the essential design phase of a trial. You know, a trial is not just throw a bunch of facts from their side and throw a bunch from our side, or, you know, the destructive, we poke holes, and they try to build mountains and we poke holes. You really have to have a design. We wouldn't build a doghouse if we didn't have a bit of a blueprint for that. And that's what you're going to be doing today. And I will tell you, get out of the reactive mind. Get out of it. Because there is a tendency as young lawyers, some of you were raised to believe God's in heaven, mornings at 7, all's right with the world. I'm here for the police to help you. Thank you, ma'am. The check's in the mail. I mean, some of you really, that was your upbringing. It's amazing that you're here representing the Popo people. But really, you are steeped in the biases of the world works. You know, the government is generally right and gets their man. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Well, get over it, because you've got to be able to open up. And when you wrestle and reckon with these facts and with the law that applies, you will ultimately be asked, if you're not already doing this back home, to develop and hone a theory of the case. And basically, this is not fancy. This is just, why does the guy get to go home? You know, why does he get to go home or get convicted of a lesser? And it is we, facts, law, and feelings. What is the dominant feeling? Always ask yourself, what is the dominant feeling that I need to embody in this case? If it's, you know, if it's a mistaken ID, then in a rape case, there's still a victim, so that has to be, oh, poor victim. But your guy's a victim too, so that's another, oh. Now you might have, when you're cross-examining the police, because they used procedures that would definitely taint the search for truth when they debrief the eyewitness. But you see, you choose an emotion as to each witness, as to the overall theory. You've got to have it. because you will lead the listeners. You will telegraph to the jury what they're supposed to be feeling. There's some more formal definitions of a theory. Cogent statement of a defense that cries out for acquittal. Notice it's more than just a one-liner. That's from Posner and Dodd, The Gods of Cross. Here comes Mario Conti. One central theory, and it kind of organizes everything. It's kind of the magnetic true north. Everything comes to one place around it. Tells you what to do. Fact, emotion, legal components, tells a story of innocence. Why did they get to go home? What's not a theory? These little one-liners, all right? What's not a theory? Stick your head in the sand. Oh, that slide's off there. What's the case about? How many of you, I've done this a million times. You know, somebody, what's that case about? It's a murder case. Well, again, very reactive, very defensive. Is it a murder case or is it a self-defense case? Is it my guy was put in a corner and he had no choice and he shot to survive? That's the case. You know, when you tweet this case, you want to have your line together so that you can tweet it early and often as to what is the essence of it. Beryl, being something of an old drinker, always challenged us when we were young lawyers at the college to say, could you get a bunch of drunks in a bar to listen? What will they listen to about the case? That resonated with me because my dad was an alcoholic for 25 years and a traveling salesman, and he used to go all over into complete strange bars, and within about 10 minutes they would shut the television off because he was that entertaining. And this is not a sad story about my dad. He was in a coma from alcohol, came out, we're all bedside. His dad looked at him and his dad said, Gene, you might die. There's one thing I want you to do before you die. And my dad, fresh out of the coma, looked at his dad and said, well, what's that, Dad? And he says, I want you to accept Jesus Christ. And my dad, fresh out of the coma, said, I'll take his liver. So there's always a liver in these cases. To give you a concrete example of a theory, faced with a pipe guilty charge of a man twice her size, half her age, back against the wall, she shot to survive. That's why she gets to be found not guilty. A theme is just a little smaller piece of that. It's an excerpt that kind of brings to mind. It's shorthand. He just kept coming. And when you turned and told him, I've got a gun and I could shoot it, and you wanted him to go away, he didn't. He just kept coming. And he just kept coming in the face of you saying, no, no, please, you're giving me no choice. He just kept coming. And you can use those theme lines, those tag lines as part of your cross. That can be a chapter of cross, chapter of opening, chapter of closing. But the theme is a subset, but it brings to mind. Brainstorming, you're going to see a lot of different faculty techniques for brainstorming this afternoon. One technique is to ask why. I've always loved Rainier Rilke. Rilke said, love the questions. And that has been something of comfort to me all of my life, to not run from, but to love the questions. And what you want to do in a why storm is to think, what would the jury ask? What would trouble the jury? Why would a child lie about this? It's a sex act, those kinds of things. I did a child molest trial, and my defense was, you know, I did the brainstorming, did the why storming. I knew the jury was going to say, why would a child lie? And I thought, well, actually, because this particular child is a liar. And so I brought in peers. You know, you're allowed opinion evidence and reputation evidence. And I had a bunch of 10-year-olds to say, you know, how long have you known Johnny? Oh, since I was 4. And, you know, what context have you observed? Oh, you know, 1,000 on the playground, at home, you know, at the school, blah, blah, blah. And you have an opinion as to whether he can tell the truth or not. Johnny's a liar. You know, what it does, it's so beautiful because you saw in the why what you needed to answer. You set about with your investigation to give an answer to satisfy the jury's why, and now you have gutted the prosecutor's argument that, well, you know how they get up in those cases. Well, why would a child lie about this? And what are they going to do? It's a liar. What do I say now? I'm stripped of all of what I have. In a brainstorm or a why storm, you have to kind of concede that there are grit your teeth facts. There are things you're stuck with. They call them facts beyond change. no matter what you do with them. You shake them, you investigate them, you twist them, you poke them. You're stuck with them, and you got to deal with them. You can do some things, we all know, and this is a trial advocacy program, so we're not going to focus on motions practice, but we all know you can really reduce the facts beyond change, sometimes down to the variables you can prevail on by litigating and eliminating motions, suppression motions, by doing good investigation, by making sure your subpoenas get out, and on and on. But when you sit down with that, once you've done your motions and you know what's left of the case, what they can get in, what you can and can't get in, now you've got to collect a brain trust. Make sure it is not a bunch of glad-handing, like-minded liberals. You know, when I was working for the Obama campaign, we'd all sit around and convince ourselves in Indiana that, oh my God, everybody was voting for Obama. And then you drive down the street and see 10,000 McCain and Palin, you know. So you really couldn't just look yourselves in the mirror and have a kind of love fest with each other. You need to bring people like my deceased mother to the table who would say, why the hell are you representing that guy and he sure looks guilty to me? You look at it from every which way but loose. You look at it as somebody who's fighting something as formidable as endemic racism in this country by any means necessary. You look for what I call the yes but. I had a case in federal court, ancient history. Guy's fingerprints on the gun, felon 22 times over, felon in possession of firearm. Easy case, he had the bullets in his pocket, you know. So, well, go to the lab, look at the fingerprint, it's his thumb, and it's on the top part of the gun, and it's consistent with what he told me, which is, I broke it open to take the bullets out because my curious 2-year-old was in the house when Ray bought the gun into my house. That was a not guilty. Killed the government, but it was a not guilty. Felony murder. You know, my guy claims he was out in the car when the older co-defendant went back in and killed the restrained homeowner. You know, his footprints were in the room where she was restrained. Look at it closely. The yes but was his prints were always superseded, covered by the co-defendant's prints. There was not a single footprint in the room where she died that was his with nothing on top of it. It was always the other guy came first. I did an Iraqi vet case. You know, the confession just seems beautiful. It doesn't seem coerced. It doesn't seem, you know, it just seems beautiful. Hi, yes, sir, no, sir, you know, everything's fine. Iraqi vet started working line by line through that confession. First answer. Where do I live? I gotta check my wallet. It's like 42583, and we just, you know, Route 2, and we just moved there. And you know, I'm thinking, well, I'd have to look at my wallet for 42583 myself. So you know, went by that. A month later, look at it again, and we just moved there, and we just moved there, and everything. The co-defendant, where does he work? Turns out he was talking about a time 8 months earlier where he worked. And now we start to go line by line through this confession, and we realize, as we say in Indiana with Kurt Vonnegut, this man has come unstuck in time, which is dissociation, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And that was a case where I made the government so nervous about the felony murder, excuse me, and his suffering as an honorably discharged vet, that they offered us 7 months on an assisting. Because I shook the tree of those facts and shook it and refused to look at that as, geez, it looks bad. I looked underneath the belly of the beast and I got it. So, you know, OJ, a lot of people disagree with that verdict, especially if they're white, but you know, why does he have a chemical preservative in the blood that's found on his sock? A little odd. Right, what makes a good fighter? You accept the bad blow. You do team defense. How many of you are in offices where you routinely meet to brainstorm each other's cases? Maybe a third. Yeah, hopefully by working with your 7 peers, you're going to figure this out. Terry Nichols, this beautiful theme that helped save Nichols' life came from one of the support staff. You know, this was not just him working alone like Tiger. Some of the way I brainstorm is I think we are playing God. We are, particularly in the death penalty, we're going to kill this person. And so I say, what would Jesus do? Or what would Jody do? I say, if God was investigating this case, and we are being godlike, because we're going to kill them or cage them for the rest of their lives, then what would God, the investigator, have done? It makes for a outline for your cross, the things not done cross. I am a firm believer in the chicken shit cross. If you can do things not done, things not seen, things not collected, leads not pursued, you can't lose on that. You know, you really can't lose on that, particularly in the days we live in now with the CSI programs on television, and the jurors thinking, you know, yeah, you could have. I mean, I had this friend, her niece arrested on a shoplifting, so we tried this case, and you know, you're talking in voir dire, and you're thinking this is just going to be a boring voir dire. Well, all of a sudden the prosecutor's going, you know, how many of you prospective jurors have watched CSI, and how many of you think we should bring you fingerprints and hair and fiber in a shoplifting case? And they're like, yeah, we can, you know, and you're like, oh boy, manna from heaven, you know. You make timelines. You make timelines of every player in the case. You look from different points of view. Too often, we're zero-sum. We do that black-white. The prosecutor's point of view, our point of view. There's usually 12 points of view. Shake out different points of view. It helps you see things less defensively, all right? Motivations. Most human behavior is goal-directed. And so if you brainstorm the motivations, the five senses, the emotions, that can make you kind of all-powerful. Wow. Gangsta Bitch Barbie and Magnum Barbie. This, I think, is to the point that some things are not always what they seem. Okay, send a telegram, a tweet, clear English, no legalese. I had a friend who used to call the prosecutor, and the prosecutor would answer the phone, hi, Joe. He'd say, you know, man shot in self-defense, back against the quarter, no choice, shot to survive. Hi, how you doing? And it just drove him nuts. But you know, you wear a prosecutor down like that you're so into your perspective on the case, that they start to get sick of you and think, man, he really knows it. The themes, the subparts, okay? I actually wrote this one. I didn't write many of these. I'm a decent artist. I'm a profound collector of art. I'll be collecting from you while you're here. The lying sack of snitch. I once was, last year, in front of a judge in Indianapolis, and I was talking about the witness, and I wanted to hit him with a blivic. Anybody know what a blivic is? No. 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound sack. And the judge knew. It's an old Polish phrase, a blivic. Close enough for government work. You know, that kind of, oh yeah, it didn't really matter to get it right. Rugs, not drugs. That's a Jerry Goldstein. They were importing rugs. They didn't know there were drugs in it. Oliver Wendell Holmes, a Supreme Court justice, even a dog distinguishes from being stumbled over and being kicked. In these days of filing criminal cases on everything, I have found in the last few years there's more accident defenses. There's more it really wasn't a crime defenses than there were 10 years ago. They file on everything now. You know, I think we're going to see somebody charged with Michael Jackson for sure. I mean, that's going to be a crime scene before it's all over. This is a Randy McGinn, revenge is a dish best served cold. You know, you get these cold cases coming up after the fact. That's a nice line for that. I like, you know, you get a lot of domestic violence, or you get the child molest supposed victim who's been puppeteered by the disgruntled divorcing parent. You know, it's war. It's a domestic war, but in war, truth is the first casualty. And that's what happens. These kids become the mouthpieces for the parents' anger. And you know, when you can look at the child with a friendly cross and kind of say, you know, you don't have a bed unless mom gives you a bed, and you don't have sheets, and you don't have breakfast, and you don't have television, and you don't have clothes. I mean, you just start kind of painting the quiet point that these little beings are completely dependent on the parent gods of their existence. Well, of course, they're going to buy into mom saying, Dad did this to you. Can't put truth on the auction block, which is really what's going on when you get these races to the courthouse, court defendants looking for pleas. They're auctioning off the truth to the highest bidder, or more typically, as we know, the fastest bidder, the one who gets there first. Who's going to wait for the sting to kill the bee? I mean, there's a lot of, Bush can do preemptive violence in Iraq, but our clients can't do it out on a dangerous street where the crime rate is rocketing. There's times where you really do need to be preemptive in your violence, and that's okay. Trilogies are nice with themes, case about human memory, human nature, and ultimately human mistake. Things we don't know can hurt us, garbage in, garbage out. Have folks followed the National Academy of Science report? Anybody aware of that? A few, yeah, in fact. Google that. In February of this year, the National Academy of Science, after an incredibly lengthy, detailed study involving scientists, prosecutors, law enforcement officers, maybe even a defense lawyer or two, but a real gold standard group of people, basically indicted every single type of forensic science in this country's criminal courts, but for DNA. And now, in Melendez versus Melendez-Diaz, they have come out, Scalia has quoted favorably from the NAS report saying forensic science is on the ropes in India, in this country. And so you need to be litigating, and it really should be something, don't do it alone. Get the big guns, if you're the big gun, fine, but get other guns to support you. You should be litigating the reliability of fingerprint, the reliability of tool mark and firearm identification, the reliability of blood spatter. These are all suddenly up for grabs, and you really need to be on top of that in your office. He gnawed his own foot off to survive. I won a confession case with that because I likened the confession to an act of self-wounding, something that my small little rabbit of a defendant had done when he was caught by a huge steel trap in the government's claws. And all he could do to escape was say what they wanted. He gnawed his own foot off to survive. Baby shoes. Don't think these things have to be long. There was a contest with a bunch of writers back in the 50s. Who can write the most powerful story? And Hemingway, not surprisingly, won. 6 words. For sale. Baby shoes. Never worn. See it? For sale. Baby shoes. Never worn. I mean, they had the hope, they got the shoes, the baby died, and they're so broke or so sickened over the loss that they're going to sell the shoes. They can't look at them. I mean, look what he's put into 6 words. So these things don't have to be long. I'm walking around. This is my consciousness. I no longer smoke dope. It's gotten too strong. I don't like it. I don't even understand dope anymore. It's just not the way, it's not the dope when I was young. I am always walking around thinking of defenses. And I'm seeing somebody changing a tire. And you know how they'll say, well, you always carry that gun. You always carry that tire out. You looked to flat that tire. You went looking to get a flat tire. You wanted a flat tire. You picked a fight with a pothole and a nail, didn't you? I mean, think what you can do. Because there's a lot of things that we carry simply in case, not because we're hell-bent on destruction. On the other hand, our creativity can reach a point where we've all done this, you tell your friends, and even if they are drunk, they're laughing. That is the trial psychosis. We're not paid enough not to have it, just recognize it for what it is. Two examples. Nobody would be so stupid as to rob a bank without a mask. Well, let me take you through what, some ideas just in one particular area of defense to kind of see how this creative brainstorming and why-storming could serve us when you're walking around. You are at the, airport. You know what I'm seeing when I see at the airport? I'm seeing that people have taken those look-alike bags and they've put something distinctive on this. But now that they're doing these, they sell these distinctive tags. Now what we're starting to see is 2 people have the red tag from the company that makes the red tags, and they're both grabbing that bag. So you get the red tag ID. And sometimes we have that, don't we, in a case? You know, it's the long beard ID. I mean, if there had been 3 people out there with a long beard, they would not have been able to pick your guy. You're developing a hook. You're looking historically. You know, your creativity isn't just in the present, it's in the past. You know, I love the First Amendment cases where you can quote Lenny Bruce. If I can't say fuck, how can I say fuck the police? You're always looking. You're looking because when I moved to Indiana from Atlanta, this is who the juries are. And it's absolutely terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying who these people are. They don't like us. And most of them often are not fit to sit because they've been fed and bought into that pablum from the government that they get it right, that they get their man. They are not suspicious. It has to be a poor juror or a minority juror whose life experience really is that the police don't get it right. Only those folks are really able to fit. I'm going to go through this. Jeff's going to do some racism stuff, so I'm not going to do this. My point is, though, that you're always looking. Let's say in the mistaken ID situation, you know, you want to ask the juror a question that will get everybody to play, okay? So you don't just ask one of these, you ask them all. You know, prospective jurors, how many of you have called the wrong waitress over, put the key in the wrong car door, there's a gender stereotype, picked up the wrong coat, the wrong umbrella, all of these things, been told you had a double, look just like somebody, gone up to somebody you thought you knew, and then you weave in your cross, and it was broad daylight, and you didn't have a gun in your face, and you'd slept, and you hadn't had anything to drink, and the lighting was beautiful, and you were not under stress. And it was only after several seconds did you realize it wasn't quite the person you thought it was, and with some embarrassment, you backed away. And so you're setting up your cross and your clothes there. You know, the questions when you're theorizing in voir dire, and I just want to take theory theme through the stages of a trial, little snapshots. The questions need to really be defense-oriented questions. I've heard defense lawyers get up, you know, and how many of you have been a victim of child molest? Well, these days, the pendulum has swung, and I don't want to look out at a prospective panel and see hands of only victims of child molest, or see if it's individually done at the bench, only victims of child molest come to the bench. So I'm going to expand that question, or been a victim of false accusation. Now all the hands go up, and we don't know if you're raising your hand because your wife was a victim, or because your grandmother was a victim, or your grandfather was falsely accused by a granddaughter. We don't know. So it makes the concept of false accusation real just because you did a theory-based posing of the question in voir dire. When you're talking to them about testifying, people do this, you know, I don't even understand why defense lawyers do this. You know, some of the mistakes I've made myself, and I understand them, but this, we don't have to do nothing. We can just sit on our hands. We can play cards. We can play Tilly. Well, frankly, I would be pissed off if I was a juror, if a defense lawyer copped that kind of attitude about the whole machinery that's brought this case forward, and my having to be away from my life to sit as juror in this case. And so I want to make sure they understand how difficult this is. Have you ever had to make a speech where your life in a capital case or your freedom depended on how you do? And so how do you think, you know, that you might take advice of counsel and choose to exercise your Fifth Amendment right on that? In opening statement, I really think we have the high ground, and Colette's going to give you a great lecture and get some amazing examples that really illustrate how we have the high ground. But the bottom line is, if you're in line at the grocery store and you're flipping through those magazines or in the TV guide, and it says, you know, guy caught red-handed on surveillance camera, 42 witnesses, confession, this is not a show you're going to watch. It is boring. There is no mystery in it. We're not on the road to find out. It doesn't involve you. It's a done deal. You're looking for the blurb that says, lies, sex, betrayal, undercover this, slut that, you know. I mean, we love, that's our stuff. And jurors actually love that stuff. That's the show they're gonna watch. So our stuff really is more interesting. And I think jurors can be taught to have minds of suspicion. Looking around, again, walking creatively, thinking theory. I am looking at the fact, and I will ask jurors in voir dire, how many shop at Sam's Club? And they're kind of, how many have more than 20 rolls of toilet paper or Bounty in their basement? You know? Do you deal Bounty? Are you a toilet paper dealer? Is that what you're doing? I've heard people come to your house and leave somewhat quickly. Is that about you selling some Bounty towels? So you see, and you just kind of, you're playing already. You're pissing in the corners and planting flags. You know, you're playing already with their stuff. And I like that. How many had a kegger party, you know, a beer party in college? How many of you brought 1 six-pack and then sent, you know, and drove out to get the pizza? No, you brought a kegger. Were you dealing beer from that little frat house? No, you just knew better than to be out on the street, making yourself vulnerable to arrest each time you realize, oh my God, we've gone through 42 cases and we need 43. I mean, you're not going to risk being arrested. So that's the way you shop. I particularly love, since I went to the National Holocaust Museum in Israel, and I learned that in the year after the concentration camps were opened up, there were more Americans giving more money to animal shelters in America than were given to Jewish refugee relief. Now, once you get sick over that fact, and perhaps hope it's just a matter of, or maybe the word didn't get out or whatever, but you look at that fact, and as a criminal defense lawyer, you're the trickster. You're looking for why do I love this? Well, what I love it is, we know that there are jurors who are nicer to their dogs, cats, birds, than they would be to our clients. And so if I can bring an animal into the case, and in closing, I'm going to brainstorm a way that an animal will play. Like, if I'm an ID, those moths in industrial England who once were white and now have evolved to have black wings so that they can sit on the carbon, you know, the coal dust, trees and telephone poles and not be picked off by birds. I'm going to talk about the rabbit that gnawed its own foot off to survive. I'm going to talk in a circumstantial evidence case where the government gets up there and, you know, makes it seem such a fait accompli. Oh, circumstantial evidence, it's the best stuff. You know, today it's dry, and why, just this morning you looked out and it's wet. And you think, what could have happened? Oh my God, the gods pissed on the world. No, it rained. Oh, that's circumstantial evidence. Well, what they're doing is cheapening the burden, right? And I sat there and endured that for years, and I finally got a story together to counter it. Story is true. My grandfather was a potato farmer in upstate Michigan. He had the fortune of having 5 sons, so he had an in-house workforce. Up the road, there was an older farmer who had married late in life, was very poor. He had 1 son who was about 9 years old, not quite old enough to do much, certainly in the back fields. And they were broke. They were hard life. Boy comes home from school, his mom has saved up a little money here and there, and she's made them a blueberry pie. And it is sitting, and it is cooling, and it is beautiful. The lattice work is there, the smell is there, the blue of the blueberry is there. And the little boy thinks, I think I could just slip a spoon underneath it and slip out a little and try it. And so he does, and it is wonderful. They don't get treats in this house. Does a little more and a little more, and then looks out the back window and sees his dad kind of coming bent, dust covered, up from the back field too early, which means probably the tractor broke, something's broken, something's gone bad. And he looks at that pie, and the little boy realizes in that moment that the lattice has fallen because he's eaten too much of the pie. And he takes the one luxury that his parents had ever indulged him. He takes his little puppy, and he gets that pie, and he rubs the puppy's nose in the blue of the blueberry pie. And the dad comes in and he sees that puppy who had chewed some furniture legs, who had chewed some shoes, 404B evidence, 609. And he takes that puppy out to the barn and he beats it until it dies. And that's what it means to be convicted on circumstantial evidence. Do you see the difference? Yeah, now. And now they care. Maybe your slime-ass, no conscience, evil incarnate client. Damn it, the puppy. All of my clients empty their guns, all of them, or stab 1,000 times. One to the point where I had this case right around the time I got a kitten, so I named the kitten Reload. Because it was like, how appropriate, you know. But look, from the animal world, when this happens, it looks like overkill. Well, my dog, when I was a little girl, if a snake was so stupid as to wander into our yard, and I mean a garter snake, I don't mean anything that had any capability of hurting anybody, but just the smallest of snakes, and my dog would grab that snake in her teeth, and she would shake it. She's a good-looking shepherd, and she would shake that until it broke in half, and one part would be here up on the top of the car or the other. That's overkill. Maybe the government will tell you that she should have stopped on the first shake and said, this next shake might be premeditated. I don't think I should do that. You know what? She wanted to be sure. Her loved ones were at risk, and she had to be sure. You tell her she was doing overkill. Weapon fixation. My son was one of those who wanted to be dropped in by, airlifted into the wilderness and wanted to live for 2 weeks on ants. And, prove to me that he could be a survivalist, and this was what it was. So he had all these little books he read, and it's like, red before yellow, kill a fellow, red before black, venom black, and I'm Ben, look at me. He always did this when he wanted me to watch something he was doing. Ben, look at me. I said, look at the mouth. If the mouth is going like this, get the hell out of here. And that's weapon fixation. Who of us has an expert money necessarily to hire an expert to talk about that? Humor is another one of our weapons in executing on these theories and themes. This is true. Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. Chaplin entered and he lost. When it matters most, in matters of global security, our government is willing to admit the dirty little secret that people do have look-alikes. When we got Saddam Hussein out of his hiding hole, we tested his facial features against known faces of Saddam Hussein because it was known that there were two, what is that, the Padme, the doubles, and the Padawan, you know what I mean? Princess Amidala has a double. You could talk about that. They purposely decoys so that the real person yet survives. We know it, we admit it. Brainstorming word choice, I've talked about this one. Sometimes in closing you can just kind of have a poster of a skull and crossbones, and every time you talk about something the snitch said, go over and stand by that. It's poison, it's tainted. I look in poetry, because I do like poetry. Marge Piercy has a poem about rape, in which she talks about the fact that women are always fearing, when they see their guy coming toward them on the hiking trail and they get that kind of aluminum taste in their mouth. And, it's the fear of the back seat of the car and, looking around, always having to be that vigilant. And even if the man is unarmed, Piercy's poem talks about the man coming toward you with his fists like jackhammers, his fists of iron, his fists of steel. And you might be able to win a battered woman's self-defense case, or at least get a lesser. And, sometimes the jury will kind of go, geez, I thought he was armed. They are armed if the height-weight differential and the strength is that distinct. In my false confession set case with the Iraqi vet, every immutable physical fact I'm now juxtaposing with what he said. And if there's any clash, again, I'm making it bigger. We make those few facts we have bigger. That's how we make our theory kind of have a push-up bra on heels. I mean, you've got to make it be seen and noticed because jurors are really kind of simple thinkers. Shoddy investigation, look at language as a tool for persuasion. Cancer, that is what the Germans used, the Nazis used, the Jews were vermin. Look at the language they're using now against the juveniles, the kids without conscience. It's straight back from the 40s and the late 30s in Nazi Germany. Brainstorm reasonable doubt, and make sure you use a story where there's a small error, but it has legal consequences, so that there's fine cracks in the ice. And we hear the cracking. The cracking is your cross. The cracking is his good character witness. The cracking is his maybe not perfect, but the idea there was somewhat of an alibi. And are you going to let this fall through? Will you let him fall through? Do you let your child out? It's the fly in the candy bar. It's the razor blade in the Tylenol. It's these scares. We don't need a lot. We need the fly in the ointment. We need one small thing that's going to pollute it. Now with computers, I think it's the virus in the computer. Do you open that attachment? The government wants you. In eastern Indiana, we have a lot of hunters, and invariably every few years somebody shoots somebody else. We had a guy who shot his own son because he had the kid wearing an orange hat. The kid dropped something, bent down, and it moved low. There were orange leaves, and Dad said, I saw that movement low, and I thought it was orange leaves, and I thought it was a deer, and he shot his own son right in the head. So those things are reasonable doubt. Drunk driving cases, we put machines on a pedestal, like the fatted calf, and we worship them, they're perfect. Again, take the proposition, as Aristotle would say, as a rhetorician, take it back to its logical, absurd advance, which is machines are perfect, machines never lie. So now we're going to go into the jury. Where were you when the Challenger shuttle exploded? Right? And they're going to look at you like you're stupid. But then you're going to get up and say, his wife said he was home, his daughter said he was sober, the bartender said he left and he seemed fine, but we're supposed to put this machine on a pedestal. And machines, according to the government that brought you NASA, a multi-billion-dollar industry, we're supposed to believe that. Constructive possession. I'm always finding things, in my car when other people are there. My kids just litter my car with their stuff. I once did a case where I put a paper picture of a gun underneath the prosecutor's office. Those cases where there's 4 people in a car and 2 of them plead and your guy's left standing, and and the initial police report just says arrested all 4, gun in car, nobody would claim it. But then they get in court, and it's like they say, oh yeah, your guy admitted it because he's the only one standing. So you bring this out in closing, you whip under there and go, and the prosecutor's like, object, that's so unreasonable, that's unfair, that's the way it happened. And then you just kind of, whether it's the same or not, you just kind of, his real-time outrage and upset is exactly what my client's been feeling from the day of his arrest until now. That just seemed. Don't make the mistake, though. I talked about this in Oregon, and a guy drew an amazingly lifelike rendition in cardboard of a machine gun. And it was rather in the courtroom, and I got a letter from the judge. What were you teaching them? The last thing I just want to say is sometimes we are playing for a hang. And I'm looking to kind of put a steel rod up the backs of maybe the few jurors I've been able to get on my side. One of my favorite cases, when I was a baby lawyer, I had a federal bank robbery case, and the government looked at this woman who looked really strong. Turned out she'd been a Secret Service agent for 10 years, but she quit. And I took one look at her and said, gay. So the gaydar was going off, so I took off my engagement ring, and I really argued the case to her because I did not have shit. We were on an insanity defense in federal court, and my expert said my guy, who robbed the same bank twice at the same teller station, the second time after having escaped from federal prison, wearing his G-stamped federal prison pants and going thereafter to the same bar where he bought the same drink and played the same song on the jukebox, because this was all about unrequited love, because he didn't have the money to get the girl of his dreams. So as the jukebox is playing, you know, I'm so lonesome I could cry. The police are coming on the radio and they're like, that was the bank, little small branch, down South Ball. Which tower station? This old guy, old FBI guy. Really? Note or gun? Note. Wonder where Buddy Wiggles, oh, he's in prison. Well, let's just go to that bar and see. There's Buddy Wiggles. So my expert said he suffered from a repetition compulsion. So I know I didn't have a snowball's chance of hell, although I did test that by the USA before we got going. And I said, just do me a favor. Take that home to your wife and ask your wife what she thinks about a guy who would do such a thing. And she comes back, fucker's crazy. And so I get up in the opening, I said, you know, if he would take that back to his wife, I bet he, objection, I bet she'd say he was crazy too, you know, lay evidence. But that was a sting. But anyway, you know, scar tissue is stronger than the real thing. I mean, I broke my arm, and it's stronger arm than the one that didn't break. Tony Serra, somebody from California I know is kind of a legendary guy. He talks about practicing his objections, where he gets in the shower in the morning and he's, objection, 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 and he's walking into the court, oh, objection, objection. I mean, you know, you kind of get your walk and get your talk and, you know, be in your mode, be in the zone. But this is a jury that hung because the gay woman decided that she liked me and she got the other women on the jury to hang and on the insanity defense of repetition compulsion. And they came back later with a bank larceny offer, which was really a good offer in that case, because it was really a bottle done with a note. So you want to find people, and Josh Carton is going to teach you how you find those people and give those people a piece of the case so that they can be the guardian of that piece and be there with you to hold forth in support of your theory back in the jury room. But you want to find those people who resonate with your theory and with your themes, and you want to give them some strength. So you might tell a story in closing about strength. And a story I've told is about my daughter, my firstborn, and she was quite petite. So she was still about 4 when she had to be in the car seat. And I had her, it was before airbags, so I had her in the front seat. She's in her little car seat, and we got in traffic. And I was really, if somebody tried to cut me off, you know, everybody was being crazy, people were, you know, giving each other the finger. It was just a very ugly situation. And I got tense, and I looked over, and she's standing up in her car seat. And so I just looked at her, and I said, sit down. And I don't talk to my children that way. I really don't. And it's really rare. So she did. And after we got out of the traffic, you know, I kind of look over, and there's this little face. And I, you know, and I look over and I said, I am so sorry. That was wrong. I should not, but I was afraid it was danger. She just looked at me and she said, I'm still standing up inside. So that is what you want to say to these jurors. You know, 2 months, 2 years from now, there's not going to be those other 11 people who challenged your embracing of the defense theory. They're not going to be with you looking back in the mirror. It's going to be you. And you want to be able to say that you stood up for what you saw and you voted your conscience. Thank you.